The morning sun gently illuminated the peaceful suburban neighborhood. Warm golden rays streamed through the windows of the small home belonging to Sarah and Jack's family, where the chirping of birds echoed from lush green branches. As usual, Sarah woke up early, quietly drawing back the curtains to welcome the first light of the day. She stood by the window, gazing at the familiar scenery of the tranquil street, taking a deep breath to embrace the new day. Sarah and Jack had been married for nearly 10 years and had 2 children together. Jake and Lily, their life, at least on the surface, seemed like a modern fairy tale, a cozy home, well-behaved children, and stable jobs for both. Sarah was an elementary school teacher, deeply dedicated to her work and loving toward her students. Jack worked at a technology company as a project manager. Despite his busy schedule, he always made time for his family, being a wonderful father who knew how to bring joy to their children. Their mornings always began with a rhythm full of love. Sarah prepared breakfast for the family, creating simple yet flavorful dishes. At the breakfast table, the aroma of toasted bread mingled with the scent of freshly brewed coffee. Jake and Lily, with playful smiles, argued over who would get the first spoonful of honey. Jack came down the stairs, smiling at the familiar scene. He approached Sarah and gently placed a kiss on her forehead. "Good morning, my love," Jack said with a tender gaze. Sarah smiled in return, her heart fluttering at his loving gesture. Even after years of marriage, Jack always found ways to make her feel cherished and appreciated. These moments reassured Sarah that her life was truly fulfilling. After breakfast, the family prepared for the day ahead. Jack drove Jake and Lily to school while Sarah headed to the elementary school where she taught. During the drive, Jack talked with the kids about plans for the weekend, suggesting a trip to the park or a movie they both loved. Laughter from the back seat filled the car, making Jack feel content. Their lives flowed in peace and happiness, filled with the small joys of a middle-class family. However, like every story, life has its unexpected twists. Beneath the surface of their happiness, small cracks had begun to form, cracks that no one noticed until they became too large to ignore. As time went by, Jack's work became increasingly demanding. His company was growing rapidly, and Jack's role required him to dedicate more time and effort. Late-night meetings and endless business trips began to create a distance between him and his family. Jack started coming home late, missing family dinners and the intimate conversations he once shared with Sarah and the kids. Sarah could sense the change in Jack. She couldn't recall the last time the whole family had sat together to watch a movie. Weekend outings to the park or family picnics were replaced by Jack coming home exhausted, only wanting to rest. Sarah tried to understand her husband's situation. She knew his job was stressful and didn't want to add to his burdens. But this shift left her feeling lonely, a kind of loneliness that was hard to articulate. She made efforts to rekindle their connection. Sarah planned romantic dinners, preparing Jack's favorite dishes, but he would either come home late or cancel due to an unexpected meeting. The affectionate messages she sent often went unanswered or received brief replies like, "I'm busy, let's talk later." A growing sense of sadness and disappointment began to weigh on Sarah, but she refused to give up. She believed that, with patience and love, they could overcome any challenge. In the evenings, after Jake and Lily had gone to bed, Sarah often sat alone in the living room, looking through family photos from past trips. Jack's smile in those pictures felt so distant from the man she now shared a home with. She felt lost, unsure of how to bring Jack back to the family they had built together. While Sarah was making efforts to rekindle the warmth in her family, Jack had begun to find joy elsewhere. At his company, Jack had a new colleague named Emily. She was a young, attractive woman with captivating eyes and a radiant smile that was always full of energy. Emily worked directly on Jack's team, and their professional responsibilities often brought them together. Initially, the relationship between Jack and Emily was purely work-related. However, the long, stressful meetings and pressure from projects drew them closer. Emily had a knack for making Jack feel at ease. She listened to him, shared his challenges at work and in life, and offered her support. Emily's charm and the attention she gave Jack made him feel alive again, bringing back emotions he hadn't felt in years. One late evening, after wrapping up a long meeting, Emily suggested they grab a drink to unwind. Jack, worn out from the day's stress, agreed. They went to a cozy bar near the office, where the soft golden lights and mellow jazz music created a relaxing ambience. Over drinks, Emily shared stories about her life, her dreams, and the ambitions she was pursuing. Jack found himself drawn to Emily's confidence and passion, feelings he realized he hadn't experienced with Sarah in a long time. These meetings gradually became a habit. First, Jack convinced himself that they were just friendly get-togethers. But deep down, he knew he was crossing the line of loyalty. Each time he gazed into Emily's alluring eyes, Jack felt his worries about family and responsibility fade away. In Emily, he found excitement and novelty, things that seemed to have vanished from his married life with Sarah. Sarah began to feel the growing distance between her and Jack. His late nights at work became more frequent, and when he returned home, he carried an unfamiliar weariness. Different from before, Jack rarely engaged in conversations with her, and whenever Sarah tried to talk, his responses were brief, as if his mind was elsewhere. She also noticed that Jack had become more secretive with his phone. In the past, he would leave it on the table without a password, but now he always kept it close and had locked it with a passcode. On some nights, Jack claimed he needed to work late and would retreat to the living room. But Sarah could hear faint whispers and quiet laughter as he spoke on the phone. Doubts began to creep into her mind. Feeling overwhelmed, Sarah confided in her best friend, Kelly. Kelly had been her closest friend since college, someone with whom she shared all her joys and sorrows. Sarah told Kelly about Jack's changes, her feelings of loneliness, and the suspicions that had started to take root. Kelly listened attentively and advised Sarah to investigate carefully before jumping to any conclusions, but also urged her not to ignore her instincts. Sarah started paying closer attention to Jack's actions. One afternoon, while she was out shopping, she unexpectedly saw Jack sitting in a cafe with a young woman. They appeared to be close, and Jack was smiling at her in a way Sarah hadn't seen him smile at her in a long time. She froze in place, her heart shattering into pieces. She couldn't believe her eyes or accept that the man she loved and trusted so deeply could betray her like this. However, Sarah didn't confront Jack immediately. She felt she needed to gather more information and give herself time to process her thoughts. She didn't want to make accusations without concrete evidence. But from that moment, Sarah knew her life would never be the same. Her trust in Jack had been fractured, and she didn't know if it could ever be repaired. That afternoon, the sky opened up, heavy raindrops pelting the glass roof of the shopping mall where Sarah had been browsing. After picking out a few outfits for her children, she decided to stop by a nearby cafe to rest, pulling her coat tighter to shield herself from the light drizzle. Sarah hurried into a familiar coffee shop, a place she and Jack used to frequent years ago. The cozy space, filled with the warm aroma of coffee, held cherished memories of their early dates. But today, as Sarah stepped inside, she was met with a sight that shattered her heart. In a corner of the cafe, under the soft glow of the overhead lights, sat Jack, his face lit with a warm and carefree smile, one Sarah hadn't seen him give her in a long time. Across from him was a beautiful young woman. It was Emily, the colleague Jack had mentioned so many times before. Sarah froze, unable to process what she was seeing. Disbelief rooted her to the spot as a wave of loss. Anger and despair swept over her. Her chest tightened painfully as she watched Jack's tender gaze directed at Emily, a look once reserved only for her. Memories of their happiness together came flooding back, only to be drowned out by the crushing reality before her eyes. The image of Jack and Emily together was like a cold, harsh slap, extinguishing any lingering hope she had held on to. She stood there, silently watching as Jack and Emily chatted and laughed, their ease with one another cutting her deeper with every passing moment. Sarah couldn't bring herself to approach them or reveal her presence. Each word, every affectionate gesture between the two, felt like a dagger stabbing into her heart. Tears welled up, spilling over uncontrollably. Turning abruptly, she stumbled out of the cafe, her legs trembling beneath her. She didn't know what to do or how she would confront the devastating truth. Driving home in the rain, Sarah's mind was a storm of emotions. Questions with no answers swirled endlessly. Why would Jack do this? Had their love meant nothing to him anymore? The sense of betrayal consumed her, leaving her feeling as though she had lost everything. Not just her husband, but her trust, hope, and the very stability of her life. After that fateful afternoon, Sarah knew she couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. She needed to confront Jack, to hear his explanation, and to uncover the truth. For the next few days, she worked to regain her composure, mentally preparing herself for the difficult conversation ahead. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she couldn't let the pain and suspicion continue to consume her. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, Sarah sat waiting for Jack in the living room. When Jack entered the house, he looked exhausted after a long day at work. He had just slipped off his shoes and was heading upstairs when Sarah's voice stopped him. Her tone was calm but carried a pain she could no longer hide. "Jack, we need to talk," she said firmly, her eyes locking onto his. Jack froze, surprised to see Sarah sitting there with such a serious expression. He immediately sensed something was wrong, but he hadn't expected it to hit him this quickly or forcefully. Slowly, he walked over and sat down across from her. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Jack attempted a smile, but it quickly faded when he noticed the tears welling up in Sarah's eyes. Sarah didn't beat around the bush. She spoke directly. "I saw you and Emily at the cafe the other day. Jack, I need you to tell me the truth. Are you cheating on me?" Jack's face paled, and he froze, unable to find the words. Any lies or excuses he had prepared now seemed utterly futile as he looked into Sarah's devastated eyes. He struggled to speak, but all he could muster was a bitter confession. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I've made a terrible mistake, and I truly regret it," Jack said, his voice trembling. He hung his head, unable to meet her gaze. Sarah sat there, stunned. She had suspected this, but hearing Jack admit it still felt like her heart was being ripped apart. Tears streamed down her face as she collapsed onto the couch. Sobbing uncontrollably, Jack sat across from her, powerless and filled with despair. He wanted to reach out to her, to tell her he loved her and that he would make things right. But he knew that none of those words would mean anything in this moment. Sarah cried for what felt like an eternity before she finally looked up, her eyes red and filled with anguish. "Why, Jack? Why would you do this to me and the kids?" she asked, her voice choked with emotion. "What did I do wrong to make you turn to someone else?" Jack couldn't answer. He knew this wasn't Sarah's fault. She had always been a loving, devoted wife who cared deeply for their family. The fault was entirely his. He had allowed himself to be drawn into temptation, failing to appreciate the incredible life and partner he already had. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Jack," Sarah said, her voice shaky but resolute. "I don't know if we can keep going like this." Jack looked at his wife, his heart heavy with regret. He realized he had shattered her trust, and it might never be fully restored. Yet, he also knew he couldn't give up. He had to fight for Sarah, for their kids, and for the family he had jeopardized. In the days following their confrontation, Sarah decided to temporarily live apart from Jack. She moved back to her mother's house with Jake and Lily to give herself time to think and find some peace. Sarah's mother, Margaret, a strong and supportive woman, immediately sensed that something serious had happened when Sarah arrived home with sorrowful eyes and her 2 children. Margaret didn't ask too many questions. Instead, she gently hugged Sarah and reassured her. Everything will be okay. Being with her mother provided Sarah with some solace. But she knew it was only temporary. She needed to face reality and make decisions about her future and the future of her children. Back in their empty house, Jack was consumed by loneliness and regret. The long nights without the laughter of his children or the comforting presence of Sarah made him painfully aware of how much he had lost. He had destroyed the most precious parts of his life for a fleeting moment of weakness. Jack began writing letters to Sarah. He wrote about his deep regret, how much he missed her and the kids, and his desperate desire to make amends. Each letter was filled with love and sincerity. But Jack understood that words alone could not repair the pain he had caused. He also started attending marriage counseling sessions, hoping to better understand himself and work on becoming a better husband and father. Jack knew that if he wanted even the slightest chance of a second chance, he needed to show real change. Sarah received Jack's letters but did not respond. She read them each evening after the children had gone to bed, and they filled her with an indescribable sadness. She could see Jack's genuine remorse, but she wasn't sure if she could forgive or forget what he had done. She feared that returning to him might leave the pain as a permanent scar in her heart, one that might never fully heal. The months living apart from Jack were far from easy for Sarah. Although her mother was there to help, the pain of betrayal lingered, making it impossible for her to fully find joy again. She had to keep going for Jake and Lily. Sarah worked hard to maintain stability for her children, taking them to school, involving them in extracurricular activities, and striving to ensure their lives were not too affected by their parents' separation. Jake and Lily were too young to fully understand what was happening, but they sensed the change. Jake asked why his dad no longer picked him up from school, and Lily wondered if the family would still go on their weekend outings together. Their innocent questions struck Sarah deeply. She didn't know how to respond, unsure how to explain in a way that wouldn't hurt them. Jack persistently tried to see Sarah, but she often declined. She needed time to think and knew she wasn't ready to face him. However, Jack didn't give up. He reached out to Margaret, asking for permission to spend time with the children. Margaret agreed but firmly told him to keep his distance from Sarah until she was ready. During his visits with Jake and Lily, Jack did everything he could to bring joy to their lives. He took them to the park, treated them to ice cream, and spent hours listening to their stories about school and friends. But every time he dropped them off at their grandmother's house and saw Sarah from a distance, Jack felt an irreplaceable emptiness. Sarah saw Jack's efforts and realized she still loved him. Yet, that love was overshadowed by pain, doubt, and fear that this could happen again. She was afraid that forgiving him and taking him back would mean reliving these hurtful memories forever. Sarah also thought about David, her kind neighbor who had been a constant source of support. A single father, David understood the pain of a broken marriage and showed genuine care for Sarah. Whenever she talked to him, she felt a sense of calm, as if she had found a steady anchor amidst life's chaos. But despite David's presence, Sarah knew her heart still belonged to Jack. She couldn't easily let go of 10 years of love and memories they had built together. Sarah knew she had to make a decision, and it was one she needed to make not just for herself, but for Jake and Lily as well. Jack sat alone in the empty house, once filled with the laughter of Sarah and the children. Everything around him served as a painful reminder of the memories they had shared. Days when his family was still happy, evenings spent gathered around the dinner table, and moments of playing with Jake and Lily on the lawn. As Jack reflected on those memories, an overwhelming sense of regret consumed him, so intense that it felt like he could hardly breathe. Jack knew he had been wrong. He had allowed himself to be drawn to the allure of something new, letting moments of weakness cloud his judgment. Now, sitting alone in the large, silent house, devoid of Sarah's and the children's presence, Jack truly understood the magnitude of what he had lost. He felt like a man adrift, with no anchor, no one to share joy or sorrow with. Determined not to let things end this way, Jack resolved to fight for his family. He couldn't let his mistakes destroy everything they had built together. Jack wanted to make amends and prove to Sarah that he was genuinely remorseful and willing to do whatever it took to reunite with her and the children. He began attending marriage counseling sessions to better understand himself and work on his shortcomings. At these sessions, Jack met Dr. Elizabeth, an experienced marriage counselor. Elizabeth listened attentively to Jack's regrets and his desire to make things right. She encouraged him to delve deep into the reasons behind his affair with Emily and to confront why he had strayed from the values he once held dear. Through introspection, Jack realized that he had been overwhelmed by the pressures of work and family responsibilities. Those pressures had created a rift between him and Sarah, leading him to seek solace with Emily, a person with no ties to him or his life. Jack came to understand that none of this was Sarah's fault. She had always tried to support and love him. The fault was entirely his, as he hadn't been strong enough to confront his struggles and had chosen to escape instead. Jack also began writing letters to Sarah, long letters in which he poured out his heart and expressed his deep remorse. He didn't expect Sarah to reply, but he wanted her to know how much he loved her and the children, and that he wasn't willing to give up on their family. Jack knew he had to change, not just to prove his sincerity to Sarah, but to become a better man for himself. Through this journey, Jack found a glimmer of hope. He realized that the path to reconciliation wasn't just about asking for forgiveness. It was about rebuilding trust and showing through actions that he was committed to making things right. Though the road ahead was uncertain, Jack was determined to take every step, no matter how difficult, to win back Sarah's trust and restore their family. While Jack was working to make amends, Sarah began finding comfort in David, a neighbor who lived in the same neighborhood. David, a single father, understood what Sarah was going through. He was always there to listen and support her, and his presence seemed to bring a new glimmer of hope into Sarah's life. David had a young daughter named Emma, who was the same age as Jake. Every afternoon, David and Emma would take walks in the park, and they often invited Jake and Lily to join them. These walks became moments of relaxation that Sarah deeply cherished. David was kind-hearted and never pressured Sarah to share more than she was ready to. Instead, he simply stayed by her side, offering a listening ear and helping her through her difficult moments. Sarah felt at ease around David. He had a way of making her laugh. Even during her saddest days, she felt respected, cared for, and loved in a way that was genuine and without any expectations. However, Sarah also wrestled with feelings of guilt when she thought about Jack and the family they had built together. She wondered if she was letting herself go too far, if she was betraying the true emotions buried within her heart. David, too, began to develop feelings for Sarah. He admired her strength and patience, and he loved the way she cared for her children. David knew that Sarah was navigating a difficult time, and he didn't want to put any pressure on her. Yet, deep down, he hoped that one day Sarah would see him as more than just a friend, someone who could bring happiness and stability into her life. Sarah felt torn between the budding feelings she had for David and the question of whether to give Jack another chance. Every moment spent with David brought her a sense of ease and happiness, but thoughts of Jack weighed heavily on her heart, reminding her of the memories and the life they had built together. Sarah knew she still loved Jack, but she feared that returning to him would mean reopening old wounds that might never fully heal. One evening, after putting Jake and Lily to bed, Sarah sat in the living room, staring at the letters Jack had written to her. His apologies, his heartfelt confessions of regret, and the love he professed for her stirred a deep ache in her chest. She knew Jack truly wanted to make things right, but was that enough for her to forgive him and move past the pain? David, too, noticed the internal conflict Sarah was grappling with. One day, as they sat together on a park bench, David gently said, "Sarah, I can see that you're facing a very difficult decision. I don't want you to feel pressured to choose because of me, and I'll respect whatever choice you make. But I also want you to know that no matter what you decide, I'll always be here for you, and for Jake and Lily." David's words warmed Sarah's heart, but also deepened her confusion. She knew she couldn't delay the decision forever. She had to confront her feelings and make a choice about the future, not just for herself, but for her children as well. Finally, after many long nights of contemplation, Sarah decided to give Jack another chance. She knew that the love they once shared was strong, and she wanted to believe it was still enough to help them overcome the challenges they faced. More importantly, she thought about Jake and Lily. Their children deserved to have a complete family, and she didn't want them to grow up in a broken home. Sarah called Jack and arranged to meet him on a Sunday afternoon. They met at a small cafe near Sarah's mother's house, a place that didn't hold too many memories of their past. When Jack walked in and saw Sarah sitting there, his heart clenched. He knew this meeting could change everything. Sarah looked at Jack, and for the first time in months, she felt she could look him in the eye without feeling anger or resentment. She told Jack that she was willing to give him a chance, but only on the condition that they both attend marriage counseling together. She wanted to ensure that both of them were committed to healing and rebuilding their relationship. Jack nodded, his eyes brimming with tears of gratitude. He couldn't believe he was being given this opportunity, and he knew he couldn't waste it. Jack promised Sarah that he would do everything in his power to prove he deserved her forgiveness and that he would never let her or their children down again. In the days that followed, Jack and Sarah began attending marriage counseling sessions together. First, it was not easy. The wounds of the past were still fresh, and every mention of Emily brought a pang of pain to Sarah. But Dr. Elizabeth helped them learn how to listen to each other and understand each other's feelings. Jack learned to empathize with Sarah's emotions, and Sarah began to see the pressures Jack had faced in his work and personal life. They started rebuilding their relationship through small steps. They planned special evenings together, dedicating time to each other without the distractions of work or other responsibilities. Jack began taking a more active role in caring for Jake and Lily, and they created new memories as a family. Both of them understood that to truly move past the pain, they needed to learn to forgive each other and appreciate what they had. Jack realized that not only did he need Sarah's forgiveness, but he also needed to forgive himself to become a better husband and father. Sarah knew the road ahead would still be challenging, but she also felt that this time, they were on the right path. With love, patience, and determination, Sarah believed they could rebuild their family and create a stronger, more united future together. Sarah and Jack decided to restart their journey together by focusing on the smallest of things. They understood that healing their relationship after all the pain they had endured wouldn't be something they could accomplish easily or quickly. To rebuild trust, they needed to move forward step by step, exercising patience with each other and with themselves. Jack began making changes in the simplest ways. No matter how busy work got, he made an effort to come home on time so he could have dinner with his family. Their dinners regained the warmth they once had, filled with the laughter of their two children and Sarah's stories about her day. Jack also became more involved in parenting. He took Jake and Lily to school, helped them with their homework, and spent time taking them out on weekends. Jack was no longer just a peripheral figure in his children's lives. He became an integral part of their joys and challenges. Sarah began to notice Jack's efforts, and it gave her a glimmer of hope. She knew the emotional wounds would not heal easily, but she could see that Jack was genuinely trying. That made her decide to open her heart just a little, so they could work together to rebuild their family. One of the important steps in mending their relationship was revisiting family activities they had once loved. One weekend, Jack suggested they go on a picnic, just as they used to before things became strained. Sarah agreed, and they prepared food, drinks, and games for the outing. They chose a park in the countryside, with lush greenery and a small stream running through it. Jack and Sarah spread out a blanket on the grass and laid out the dishes Sarah had lovingly prepared earlier that morning. Jake and Lily ran around, laughing and playing. Jack watched his children and then turned to Sarah. He took her hand gently and said, "Thank you for giving me this chance." Sarah smiled, though her smile held a hint of caution. "I want to try, for the kids and for us," she replied, though she still carried scars in her heart. Sarah felt that the effort to rebuild their life together was worth making. That picnic became a pivotal moment for them, helping both Jack and Sarah reflect on the values they had once shared. They realized that their family was the most precious thing in their lives and that, no matter what challenges life might throw at them, Protecting and nurturing their love was a responsibility they both had to embrace. One evening, after Jack had just returned from work, he received a message from Emily. She wanted to meet him, saying she needed to talk. Jack felt uneasy. He knew he shouldn't meet Emily, but at the same time, he was worried about what she might want. Jack decided to tell Sarah about it. "Emily wants to meet me," Jack said, looking directly into Sarah's eyes, trying to convey his sincerity. "I don't want to hide this from you. I want you to know that I've completely cut ties with her. But if you prefer, I won't meet her." Sarah felt a pang of anxiety but understood that facing Emily might be Jack's way of closing that chapter for good. She looked at Jack and said, "If you think it's necessary, you should go. I'll trust you." Jack knew this was a critical test for him, and he couldn't risk hurting Sarah again. He agreed to meet Emily but resolved to end things with her once and for all. They met at a cafe where Emily was already waiting. When Jack walked in, he saw Emily with a sorrowful expression on her face. She gave him a faint smile as he approached. "Jack, I really miss you," Emily said, her voice trembling. "I can't accept that you've just abandoned me like this. I thought we could have a future together." Jack shook his head, his voice calm but firm. "Emily, I'm sorry for giving you false hope, but I can't continue this relationship. I love Sarah, and I want to be with my family. I made a mistake by letting things go too far, and now I'm trying to fix it. You deserve someone better than me, someone who can truly make you happy." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she looked at Jack. She realized this was the end and that Jack wasn't coming back to her. Without saying another word, she stood up and walked away. Jack felt a sense of relief, as though a heavy weight had been lifted from his shoulders. While Jack was confronting Emily, Sarah had to face her own fears and insecurities. Knowing that Jack was meeting Emily made her anxious, but Sarah also understood that she needed to be strong. She had given Jack a chance, and she didn't want to let her inner fears ruin it. One evening, after Jack returned from his meeting with Emily, Sarah waited for him in the living room. When Jack walked in, she could see the exhaustion on his face but also noticed a sense of relief she hadn't seen before. "I told her everything," Jack said, his voice trembling. "I ended things with her, and I want you to know that I have no connection with Emily anymore." Sarah felt a wave of reassurance wash over her. She stood up, walked toward Jack, and embraced him. "I believe you, Jack, but you have to understand that trust isn't something that can be restored overnight. We'll have to work on this together." Jack nodded, holding Sarah tightly, his heart filled with gratitude. He knew that Sarah's forgiveness wasn't something he could take for granted, and that he had to continue proving his love and sincerity every day. In the months that followed, Sarah and Jack continued their journey of healing their relationship. Both of them realized that overcoming betrayal was not just about forgiveness, but about rebuilding trust and reigniting their love through the smallest gestures. Jack didn't just tell Sarah he loved her, he showed it through his actions. He helped her with household chores, spent more time with their children, and made an effort to create private moments just for the two of them. Jack understood that to rekindle their love, he needed to bring Sarah back to the moments that had once made them happy together. One evening, Jack prepared a romantic dinner at home. He cooked Sarah's favorite dishes, decorated the dining table with glowing candles and roses. When Sarah walked into the dining room, she was surprised to see everything. Jack approached her, took her hand, and said, "I want to thank you for giving me another chance. I love you, Sarah, and I want you to know that I will always be here for you, no matter what." Sarah looked at Jack, and her emotions overwhelmed her. She knew forgiveness wasn't easy, and the process would take time, but she also knew that the love they shared was still alive, and that Jack was truly making an effort for their family. Sarah smiled, tears streaming down her face. "I love you too, Jack," she said, her voice trembling. "We'll get through this together." That night, they had dinner together by candlelight. Just like in the early days of their relationship, they both understood that love was never perfect. But what mattered was their willingness to face challenges together and never give up on each other. Sarah and Jack began anew, not a perfect new beginning, but one filled with hope. They knew that, to sustain their happiness, they had to continuously work on their relationship and cherish every moment they shared. And from that point on, their love gradually rekindled, like a warm flame illuminating the path ahead. The process of rebuilding the relationship between Jack and Sarah was far from smooth. Despite Jack's genuine efforts to change and Sarah's willingness to open her heart, the scars of the past occasionally resurfaced, reminding them of the lingering wounds yet to heal. Sometimes, during seemingly casual conversations, a single word or phrase would inadvertently trigger painful memories, pulling Sarah back into moments of loneliness and heartache. Jack understood this and never blamed or showed frustration when faced with Sarah's emotional waves. He knew he had hurt her deeply, and patience was the key to helping her overcome it all. Whenever Sarah felt overwhelmed, Jack would gently hold her, letting her lean into him without saying a word. He knew that sometimes words of comfort weren't enough. Only his presence and unwavering love could truly help her. Sarah also realized that she needed to learn to forgive, not just Jack, but herself as well. She didn't want to be haunted by the past forever. She wanted to move forward. Sarah began practicing the exercises her therapist, Elizabeth, had taught her, learning to let go of negative emotions and focus on the positive aspects of the present. She also started keeping a journal, documenting the beautiful moments she and Jack shared as they worked to rebuild their relationship. These journal entries served as a reminder of how far they had come and how they were rekindling their love day by day. Jack, on his part, continued to show his sincerity through small gestures in their daily lives. He often wrote little cards with words of encouragement and gratitude, thanking Sarah for staying by his side. Every morning before leaving for work, Jack would leave a loving note for Sarah on the dining table, making her feel cherished and appreciated. Sarah saw Jack's consistent efforts, and it gradually warmed her heart. Over time, Jack's patience and love began to rebuild Sarah's trust in him. She started feeling more comfortable sharing her fears and emotions with Jack. She no longer kept her anxieties bottled up but opened her heart to him. And this transparency strengthened their relationship. Together, they learned to communicate with honesty and vulnerability, no longer avoiding sensitive topics but facing them head-on. Through these efforts, Jack and Sarah not only mended their broken relationship but also built a deeper and more resilient connection. They realized that love required effort, understanding, and a commitment to navigate challenges together. And they were ready to do whatever it took to create a stronger future as a couple. Sarah and Jack decided it was time for their family to live together under one roof again. Sarah knew it was a significant step, and she felt that the moment had come to bring her family back together. Their house, a place that had once witnessed moments of joy as well as heartache, now needed to be filled again with laughter and love. On the day Sarah and the children moved back home, Jack prepared a small celebration to welcome them. He decorated the house with balloons, hung family photos on the walls, and prepared a large cake with the words, "Welcome home, family." Jake and Lily ran excitedly around the house, their laughter echoing through the space, filling it with warmth and vitality. Sarah stood and looked at the decorated house, feeling her heart warm. She knew they had come a long way, and though challenges still lay ahead, she felt that they had truly reunited. Jack approached her, took her hand, and said, "We're going to make this place a happy home again, aren't we?" Sarah smiled and nodded. "Yes, Jack. We'll make this a place where everyone wants to return to, a place filled with love and laughter." That evening, they gathered around the dining table, enjoying the meal Jack had prepared. Jake and Lily shared stories about school and the games they had played with their friends. Jack and Sarah exchanged glances, realizing that their children's joy was the most important thing, and that they were doing the right thing. After dinner, the family sat together to watch an animated movie that Jake and Lily loved. Jack wrapped his arm around Sarah, while Jake and Lily nestled against their mother's shoulder. They laughed together, savoring the simple yet meaningful moments of happiness. Sarah felt a sense of peace wash over her, as if all her worries and pain had melted away in that moment. Sarah and Jack both understood that to build a lasting relationship, they needed to learn from their past mistakes and continually work to rebuild trust. They spent long evenings together, sharing their feelings about the missteps they had made and discussing what they needed to do to avoid repeating them. Sarah no longer kept her emotions bottled up. She openly shared with Jack the pain and fear she had experienced when she discovered his betrayal. Jack listened without interrupting or making excuses, which made Sarah feel respected. Jack also opened up to Sarah about the pressures he had faced at work and the exhaustion he felt trying to fulfill his responsibilities as a husband, father, and manager. He admitted that instead of sharing these struggles with Sarah, he had chosen to avoid them, ultimately causing immeasurable harm to his wife. He apologized to Sarah for not trusting her enough to share his burdens from the start. Together, Sarah and Jack established new rules for their relationship. They agreed that whenever an issue arose, they would sit down and talk it through openly, without hiding or avoiding the problem. They decided that no matter how busy they were, they would dedicate at least one evening each week to spending time alone together to maintain their closeness and connection. They realized that love wasn't something that would sustain itself. It needed to be nurtured and cared for. One day, Sarah came across an old photo album she had tucked away in a cabinet. As she flipped through it, she saw pictures from the early days of their relationship, their wedding, and the first moments of Jake and Lily's lives. Each photo brought back memories of the happy moments they had shared. Inspired, Sarah decided to create a new album documenting the rebirth of their love, capturing the journey from their struggles to their renewed happiness. When Sarah showed Jack the new album, he was deeply moved. He realized that although their past was marked by pain, their present and future were shaped by their efforts to heal and grow together. The album was more than a keepsake. It was a reminder that their love could overcome any obstacle as long as they continued to work for it together. Finally, after all the challenges, pain, and efforts to rebuild, Sarah and Jack truly rediscovered their love. They knew this love was no longer the carefree, innocent love of their early days, but a love that had grown wiser, stronger, and more resilient. They understood that their love was not perfect, but it was genuine and enduring. One beautiful day, Jack decided to host a small party at home to celebrate their family's reunion. He invited close friends and family to share in their joy. During the gathering, Jack stood up to speak. He talked about the difficult journey he and Sarah had gone through and expressed his deep gratitude to his wife for giving him the chance to make amends. Taking Sarah's hand, he said, "Sarah, I know our path hasn't always been easy, but I also know that as long as I have you by my side, we can overcome anything. Thank you for always believing in me and loving me." Sarah smiled, her eyes welling with tears. She knew their love wasn't perfect, but she also knew that the most important thing was they had never given up on each other. No matter what, she looked at Jack, then at their two children playing in the yard, and felt her heart swell with happiness. That evening, after their guests had left, Jack and Sarah sat on the couch in the living room, looking out at the garden where Jake and Lily were still playing. Jack wrapped his arm around Sarah's shoulders, holding her close. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Jack said, his voice warm and tender. Sarah nodded, leaning against Jack. "Yes, we have, but I think everything we've been through was worth it. Now I know that we're so much stronger, and so is our love." Jack smiled and kissed Sarah on the forehead. They sat there together, watching their children, feeling the love and happiness that surrounded them. Life would undoubtedly bring more challenges in the future, but they knew that as long as they faced them together, they could overcome anything. Sarah and Jack's story concluded with a new beginning, one they had built together through love, forgiveness, and trust. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was a fulfilling one, because they had overcome every challenge and rediscovered love not only for each other but for their entire family.